Good evening, everybody. We'll get started now. So the MassDOT folks asked me to just welcome you and turn it over to them. I'm Mike Cahill, I'm your mayor. For BevCam, who are recording, we're at Beverly High School in the auditorium just after 6:30, tonight being Tuesday, June 27th, right? So MassDOT's going to make a presentation along with VHB, which is the engineering firm that they have retained, been working on this throughout. And then after that, there'll be a chance for some Q&A. Obviously, you'll see microphones there when the time comes. Just want to make sure that I get our elected officials. Representative Jerry Paracella is here. Matt Kubitis from Senator Joan Lovely's office. She was going to be here. Something just came up at home. So Matt's here on her behalf. And I don't want to miss anybody, but okay. So Rob Antico is MassDOT's project manager on our Three Bridges project, the temporary over the Hall-Whitaker, temporary over the Bass River, and then the two permanent replacement bridges. So Rob is going to lead off, and there are other members of both the MassDOT major projects team as well as VHB as as I said, the private engineering firm. So Rob, where are you at? Oh, there you are. Okay. Thank you.
Appreciate that introduction, Mayor. And thank you again for giving us this opportunity to present tonight. I'm Rob Antico, MassDOT's project manager for both the replacement of the Hall-Whitaker and the Kernwood Ave, including the permanent bridge. Excuse me, a temporary bridge, including the permanent bridges. This is our notice of MassDOT policy on diversity and civil rights. Thank you for joining our meeting. We appreciate your participation. So I'm just going to run down the agenda for tonight's meeting. We have a program objective, which I'll go over, a timeline update. As part of that update, we're going to give you a design update for the temporary bridge, as well as the Kernwood Ave Bridge and the repairs for the Kernwood Ave Bridge and the permanent bridge projects. We'll go over next steps and questions and answers. First, I'll just let you know who we have here as part of our team and part of the presenting team. Thank you to the mayor who's here, MassDOT's Director of Major Projects, Michael O'Dowd, District 4 Highway Director, Paul Stedman. I'm the project manager, Robbie Antico, and our consulting team, VHB, we have Nick Shenna. He's the design manager, and Christine Triakis, who is the lead traffic engineer. We also have Howard Stein Hudson, who's part of our public outreach team. And we do have a stenographer here tonight, Missy from Advanced Court Reporters, LLC. So everything that's said tonight will be part of the official transcript. Just keep that in mind. As part of the public outreach for tonight's meeting, notices were published in multiple languages, all listed on this slide in all these publications here, as well as the town website and multiple town buildings. So our program objective, we want to provide a reliable travel route between the Riles Side neighborhood and downtown Beverly. Obviously, the bridge is closed right now. It's currently only open to bicycles and pedestrians, and the traffic is all being detoured over Kernwood Ave Bridge. As quickly and practicable and safely, we want to restore vehicular traffic over Bridge Street, and ultimately a full bridge replacement of the Hall-Whitaker and Kernwood Avenue Bridge. So that's essentially a three-prong approach. The temporary bridge at Bridge Street over the Bass River, get traffic flowing there. Repairs and maintenance to the Kernwood Avenue Bridge to keep that reliable and in working condition. And those two steps will facilitate the permanent replacement, which would be a simultaneous construction of both the permanent Hall-Whitaker and the permanent Kernwood Ave Bridge. So now I'm going to turn it over to Nick Shenna from VHB. He's going to go through the design phase so far. Nick?
Thank you, Rob. Good evening, Mayor, local elected officials, City of Beverly. So coming out of the last meeting, I think we heard you loud and clear. Reduce schedule. We don't want to lose the temporary bridge twice, or Bridge Street twice. Hopefully that's not a sign of things to come, right? So what we did was, and I think the conversation actually started in the parking lot, we started brainstorming ideas of how to do just that. We came up with a temporary bridge alignment. We developed it in the month of November. And with that revised temporary bridge alignment, we actually were able to have a revised permanent bridge or program schedule. We collaborated with MassDOT, and we got it ready to bring it to the mayor and the local elected officials in December. Once we got consensus on the approach, we went to the Bass Haven Yacht Club and the Harbor Master to start coordination there because of our early discussions with the Coast Guard. We were informed that we would have to have buy-in from the Yacht Club. So with that, we went to the Coast Guard, we started our early coordination there, and started with our supplemental detailed survey of Bridge Street in order to facilitate this new alignment. In early January, we started our subsurface utility engineering, and I'm sure some of you saw them out at the bridge. We also continued our utility coordination to look for ways to expedite the utility replacements and relocations that would be required. We got our boring plan approval for Bridge Street, working with MassDOT, to set us up for our borings, which are about to begin. In February, we continued our temporary bridge design development, but simultaneously throughout this whole time, we continued the development of the permanent bridges as well. We continued coordination with the Bridge Street reconstruction, which is being completed by a separate consultant to make sure that the temporary bridge, permanent bridge, and Bridge Street were all coordinated for limits of work, utilities, et cetera. And in March, we finalized our 25% highway design, preliminary bridge sketch plans, preliminary right-of-way, early environmental coordination, and traffic analysis submission to MassDOT for the temporary bridge. While MassDOT's reviewers and individual sections were reviewing our 25%, that allowed us to start our permitting coordination for the boring program and the temp bridge with Concom, MassDEP, National Marine Fisheries, and the Mass Historical Commission, working with MassDOT's environmental unit. In May, we worked with MassDOT for comment resolution with the various departments. We completed our hazardous materials memo for the temporary bridge. And in June, the current month, we completed our updated traffic counts at Bridge Street and Kernwood for both the temporary and the permanent bridges. We also submitted and worked with MassDOT on our design justification workbook for the temporary bridge. We completed an additional supplemental survey at Kernwood, and we are completing our hydraulic analysis, preliminary hydraulic analysis, not only for the temporary bridge, but also the modeling for the permanent bridges. In July, with the lifting of the time of year restriction that Rob will talk about in a few slides, we will start our boring program at Bridge Street, and not only for the temporary bridge, with priority given to the temporary bridge borings, but also for the permanent bridge. We'll also be submitting our permanent bridge type selection worksheet, which is our preliminary design alternatives analysis for Bridge Street and Kernwood to MassDOT. And we, in the next few days, we'll be submitting our boring plan to MassDOT for Kernwood. In August, we'll complete our boring program. We expect it to last 2 months of in-water borings as well as roadway borings. And we will be working on the design development of our pre-25% design highway submission for the permanent bridges. So at the last meeting, this slide may look familiar. This was the slide we presented as our preferred alternative. This was what we called our on-alignment temporary bridge. This had several benefits, which reduced impacts to right-of-way. It had reduced impacts to utilities. It had reduced impacts to environmental. However, what this didn't have was continuous maintenance of traffic on Bridge Street. And we heard that in your commentary and your questions and answers. What we worked on was a revised alignment. Similar temporary bridge construction with a prefabricated bridge elements, standard width with an external sidewalk. However, this would be shifted or parallel alignment, as we call it, to the south. This would require some additional impacts in right-of-way as well as permitting. What it does is, and I'm not even sure if I have a laser pointer, but I'm going to try. I do not. But it comes, so if you're looking from left to right on the screen, you'll come down towards the direction of the existing bridge. You'll go down to the right on a temporary fill section, cross over a temporary bridge on the order of 300 feet long, cut back onto Bridge Street, just past Margin Street, and then connect at River Street. This has been coordinated with the Bridge Street reconstruction at the intersection of River Street, as well as limit of work on the left side there on the west side of the bridge. The major benefits of this is that it allows the new Bridge Street bridge to be constructed at the same time as Kernwood. That's where we get our time savings. It's on the order of about 4 years off the end of it. If you recall, last time we were going to build the temporary bridge, go build Kernwood, take the temporary bridge at Bridge Street offline, and then rebuild Bridge Street, so that pushed out our schedule. What this allows us to do is build a temporary bridge and then build Bridge Street and Kernwood simultaneously. We'll never lose access for an extended period of time on Bridge Street for vehicular passage as well as bicycles and pedestrians. What this also requires are more rigorous requirements for the temporary bridge from the on alignment is that we will require temporary and permanent right-of-way acquisitions more significant than the previous temporary bridge. We'll also have utilities that require relocation, including the overhead. We'll have fixed bridge Coast Guard permit requirements, and we'll also have additional environmental permits from MassDOT and Army Corps, given our filling in in the river. Here on the screen is a rendering. The existing Bridge Street is on the right of the screen there, or to the north of the existing bridge, with the temporary bridge shown to the south and the temporary fill sections on the approaches. In addition to the temporary bridge revised alternative, in order to accelerate the start of the permanent bridge construction, with the opening of the temporary bridge, and as we're preparing our documents at this time, we're including the demolition of the existing bridge. What this does is it allows the next contractor to come in for the permanent bridge and begin construction immediately without having to worry about time of year restrictions for the demolition. For pedestrian and bike accommodations, during construction of the temporary bridge, we will be maintaining peds and bikes on the north sidewalk. It's actually on the order of about 8.5 to 9 feet on the existing bridge. This has been coordinated with the Bridge Street reconstruction project, which has a dedicated bike lane at River Street, and we've worked that in. On the left side of the screen, or the west side, at Winthrop Avenue, there's an existing crosswalk that feeds the school. We'll maintain that crosswalk, and that'll be where we cross pedestrians and bike traffic. This will allow us to open up the entire south side for construction of the temporary bridge. Once the temporary bridge is open, we will maintain pedestrians on the southern sidewalk as per the previous slides showing the cross-section of the bridge, and we will have dedicated bike lanes and vehicular lanes in each direction going over the bridge. Rob?
Thanks, Nick. So how do we progress this design? I'm going to show you the critical path here for the temporary bridge. Everything in peach is a critical activity. The blue shaded blocks are things that are integrated and happening simultaneously within the critical path. So right now, as Nick mentioned, there's a time of year restriction. So there's only certain type of work that can happen in the Bass River. And we cannot do the borings until starting in July. We'll take questions and answers at the end, so if you could hold your questions, I appreciate that. Thank you. So that time of year restriction due to the fish run and that permitting is controlled by the Department of Marine Fisheries, only allows certain work during certain times of the year. So we'll be out to do our borings starting in July. Those borings will allow us to complete our geotech and hydraulic analysis, which are requirements for final sketch plan approval. We are targeting October of 2023 for that final approval. Then we will have some of these other activities going on preliminarily, but a lot of this will start in earnest once we get that sketch plan approval. We'll be back in front of you again for another public meeting. Simultaneously, we'll be advancing the design. There'll be early agency coordination for environmental permits and clearances. That process will probably take until about February of 2025. At the same time, and we've already started this process as well, is preliminary right-of-way plans, takings process, and then ultimately a right-of-way certificate, which is a requirement of advertisement, and then we can start construction. What's not shown on this slide is construction. Early projections are somewhere around 2 years. Again, we need to figure out how the time of year restrictions and work in the river are going to be, a controlling element of that. So, but our early projections are the bridge would probably be open sometime mid-2027. So just to dig in a little deeper on some of those schedule constraints for the temporary bridge, as mentioned, we have right-of-way, which is currently the critical path, but also there are a number of environmental clearances, DEP, Army Corps of Engineers, U.S. Coast Guard permit. Some of these things we've already had some early coordination and discussions with, so some of that process has already started. We might have some open space parklands constraints out there, and Section 7 U.S. Fish and Wildlife National Marine Services will be part of the permitting that we have to go through. We had to go through that for the borings, as I just mentioned, and we did start early discussions on how that permitting will affect the temporary bridge. So just to drill into the time of year restrictions a little more in the Bass River, so the peach-colored areas are the times of year where we can't do any silt-producing activities in the water. So as you can see, that leaves some time, but also kind of squeezes down that time we have for work in the river. So moving on to the Kernwood Ave bridge repairs, because that's an important part of our program, keeping the Kernwood Ave Bridge functioning. So there's 4 elements to the repair and maintenance. So there's regular inspections and maintenance of the bridge. So it's routinely inspected, and minor repairs are always being done. There's 2 rehabilitation contracts. One is completed, so that recent repair project was to fix the utility support near the center pier, and that, like I said, that's been completed. We're also working on a second rehabilitation contract. So it's a major repair project, which is currently in design, approximately a $5 million value, and those repairs include steel repairs to the movable spans, timber superstructure, substructure repairs, and repairs to the wearing surface and concrete substructure. That's currently in design. We anticipate advertising in late fall, early winter of 2023, and the work probably won't start until the spring of 2024. I think there's been some concerns about the current wearing surface and can there be any repairs done to that. And we're evaluating interim repairs that will be addressed in the major repair project, but we're evaluating repair methods and products for the wearing surface for possible installation in this construction season. But due to the thin wearing surface and the timber deck and the condition of the underlying components, traditional patching methods can't be used. So the permanent bridge update, I'm going to turn back to our designer. He'll go through that schedule. Nick?
We'll flip back for a second. So what have we been doing on the permanent bridge? I hope that it was obvious in the timeline update that we are advancing both bridges at the same time, permanent and temporary bridges, and the work that has been completed and upcoming. What we have done with MassDOT is we prepared a detailed design development schedule. In the October meeting, we showed you a typical process, and we were using more typical dates. What we've been doing is drilling down to the actual activities and the schedule logic, what needs to come before what. We have been very creative in my opinion, on the temporary bridge in the order that we're doing things, which is a little atypical of the process. We're trying to have that same approach to the permanent bridges. We're continuously working with MassDOT to find ways to accelerate the designs and expedite the reviews. We've started early engagement with the various agencies to try to understand the review process, strategize the best way to permit not only the temporary bridge, but the permanent bridges. And we've also added some strength to our bench. We've added a former MassDOT and MassDEP permitting expert to our team to help us navigate us and supplement our own in-house expertise with that project. With that said, the permanent bridge schedule is similar for the Bridge Street and Kernwood that you saw at the last meeting. Our intent is that once the temporary bridge opens, we begin construction of the permanent bridges. And what this level of detail shows is that detailed schedule that we've been working with MassDOT on, with the trigger being the completion of the temporary bridge begins the construction of the permanent bridges. Like I said, we're working with MassDOT, and we've also received some assistance already from our legislative partners in order to understand the process and look for ways to expedite that process. This is similar to the slide that you saw for the temporary bridge. However, if you notice, not only do we have the Bass River for the permanent bridges, we also have the Danvers River. And the Danvers River has even more restrictive time of year constraints on work creating silt in the water. This is why the borings for Kernwood aren't being completed at this time. The borings for Kernwood will trigger and start with the time of year restriction gets lifted in the fall and winter. This all goes into our construction schedule as well, and we are in discussions with expert contract time determination, which is basically a construction scheduler that will work with our team to make sure that our construction schedules beyond our design schedules are feasible. Rob?
So that's the bulk of the presentation. If you want further information, you can check this website, the MassDOT website, and we try to put information presented tonight on that website so you can follow that link. Now we'll start the questions and answers portion of the night. And as we typically do, we open up the question and answers to elected officials first. But before we do that, I just want to remind everyone that we do have a stenographer. So if you could go up to the mic to ask your questions and state your name and affiliation, maybe your address, that would be really helpful because it'll be part of the permanent record. So with that, Mayor Cahill, would you like to start?
So couple things. First, when I introduced our other elected officials, Councilor Rotundo was right there. I apologize. Ward 1 Councilor Todd Rotundo and Kelly Bovio from Congressman Moulton's office came in right after I had said that with some of their team. So I want to just share a couple thoughts with you folks. We've been working with the MassDOT team from the time they told us they were closing the bridge last June. Coming out of the several meetings in the fall and the last public meeting in November, as was explained to you, excuse me, your number of elected officials from local up through federal, we've been working with MassDOT and trying to nail down what was an acceptable design. And as they said, making sure that there was a temp bridge that didn't have to get built and then torn down, right? So that temp bridge goes in, there's a way to get across the Bass River right up until the ribbon gets cut on the 2 permanent bridges. And that also took bringing the Coast Guard in early because the temporary bridge is meant to be a fixed span bridge. That's something that can be permitted and built more quickly, but it requires that MassDOT put a reasonable program in place so that the Bass Haven Yacht Club boat owners can get down the river and back up the river seasonally, down in the spring and back in the fall. And so that work has been going on. The Coast Guard's been fantastic in working with the Yacht Club, who've been great. MassDOT's been in that conversation with us. So that's all come together. And Coast Guard has said, as long as there's a reasonable plan in place, they will say yes to the permit that they have to approve eventually for that temporary bridge. So I'll say that this has been a partnership and everybody's working to try to push timelines. And that's where I'm going to step away from what you just heard and say that there's more we're all trying to do. So the MassDOT and VHB teams are working within the framework and constraints of the required permitting, right? And as you see, there are 3 significant permits, a state DEP permit and 2 federal permits. I think it's Army Corps and Coast Guard. So as they're looking at their timelines, that's what they're working through. For all of us, and they're regular people too, but for all of us, we know that 4 years is too long. The question is, can we collapse? And if we can, how much of it can we collapse? So what we've been doing, it's Representative Paracellis, Senator Lovely, the congressman, the counselor, we've been working with the new state administration from the time they came into office. There's a new transportation secretary, Fiandaca. There's a new environmental secretary, Tepper. We've been working with them, working with Lieutenant Governor Driscoll. And so the Healy-Driscoll administration is on this. And so now that there is a 25% design, and now that the boring work, which is really critical to understanding what's possible, is being done, and that's being done next month and through the summer. So what we've been doing is kind of teeing up this conversation, this effort to take all the federal partners, all those agencies and key people, key leadership in those agencies, the state agencies, the Healy-Driscoll administration, all of your elected officials from all levels, trying to get everybody to one table at the same time and just look and see what can be waived, what can be left aside, and what can't be, how compressed can those schedules become. Work that absolutely has to happen on the permitting front, how can it be squeezed down? Just how much can we do? And that effort is ongoing, and so, you know, none of us want to hear 4 years on the temp bridge. You know, none of that's really acceptable, I know, to you folks as neighbors. So that's the effort now that there's more information and a design that's at a certain point, is to try to move that conversation. And, you know, if it's Coast Guard and Army Corps and DEP and EPA and our elected federal delegation from the 2 senators' offices who are involved with us, Senators Markey and Warren, to the Congressman Moulton, is to try to push all of that down and get us to better timelines. These folks have to work with the timelines that are regulatorily and statutorily in front of them, And they're working hard on that, but we're trying to get from that political side, from all levels, to see if we can do better. And I will say this, talking with Lieutenant Governor Driscoll frequently on this, and as an administration, she and Governor Healy, obviously everybody there is new to their jobs in the last handful of months, they're looking at this and saying, there are a lot of projects around the state that need to get unstuck, that need to be able to move more quickly. This is the one they're trying to hold up and move right now to see if it can be done and can be used as a model to move others. So we've got everybody's attention, and we're all collectively trying to push it. You know, really, it's several days a week of work on this for all of us. Councilor, Representative Kelly, do any of you want to say anything before getting to the, please do. And then obviously, folks, they're going to handle the Q&A as soon as we hear a couple more thoughts. Representative, anything? Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, MassDOT. So a few things I just wanted to mention, a few questions. First and foremost, guys, I know we all know the bridges are broken, right? We know that the Kernwood Bridge is a crapshoot, basically. We don't know if it's going to break one day or whatnot. What I will say this, though, is my job as the counselor is to listen to you guys and move it up to the mayor and to MassDOT. One thing I can say is they have been responsive. The 4-year is not, you know, listen, I thought 4 years was the time start was going to start last year. It's not. It's starting right now. One thing that I have the privilege of is hearing a little bit more information now that we know that there's going to be an offset, the right-of-way, and some, you know, what I'm getting phone calls is because the Bridge Street project is going on as well. There's notifications and people thinking that their homes are being taken. So I'm asking MassDOT to make sure that there's clarification on 2 projects. We have the Kernwood Bridge and the Hall-Whitaker Bridge. And sometimes the rumors come up from the past presentation that, you know, their homes are being threatened to be taken. I want to just to make sure that there's assurances from MassDOT that that is in fact not part of the plan. The other thing, too, that I get a lot of calls for when the Kernwood Bridge does close is people that live on Upland and Crescent. What happens is people going down Kernwood Bridge, it's broken, they get frustrated, turn around, and they begin speeding. I have talked with Mr. Stedman to at least to try to get some signage to have it staged there, because when the contractor that's overseeing the bridges they get phone calls, they come there, it may take them 30, 45 minutes to start the resolution of the bridge. But at least if we can have our DPS or the police department come and take them and put them out there at strategic areas to give forewarning to people. So that's different things that my job as a counselor, hearing you, phone calls being made to me, working with the mayor and with MassDOT, putting the crosswalks, the quality of life issues that we're dealing with on a daily basis. I feel it every day. I travel from my house to the restaurant that was typically a 3-minute ride. It's now a 15-minute ride. I feel it. But what I will state to you is that don't stop calling me. I swear to you, I do not answer the phone calls. And I promise you I am a thorn in the mayor's side, and he has been a great partner in this project. As hard as it is to hear it now, the 4 years going forward, it's the hope that we're going to, you know, just continually advocate with the state and the federal level, the different agencies to get there. So I just wanted to kind of put those few things out there. The right-of-way that we see there, maybe just a better explanation on the temporary eminent domain and the process on that, because that was something that I know is potentially going to come up when it comes to the moving of the bridge or the offset of the bridge for Hall-Whitaker. Thank you.
I can answer the right-of-way question. So as far as residents concerned about their homes being taken, we have done some survey, and we did have to get rights of entry. So we did reach out to 1 or 2 residents for rights of entry to complete our detailed survey back during the spring. So that may be some of the reaction there. But as far as homes being taken, we don't have that in our plans for either bridge at the moment, Kernwood temporary or permanent. We don't have it in our plans. As far as Kernwood closures go, and early notifications. I don't know, Paul or John, if you want to talk about that and our system that we're working through, or.
Thanks, Nick. Paul Sedman, District 4 Highway Director for MassDOT. And just to follow up on the question that the councilor raised about notifications when the Kernwood either is under repair or just goes up for a normal opening, which we all know is quite frequent. So we've actually been working with another arm of VHB, their traffic design section, on coming up with a system where we could have automated signs installed that could be triggered when the bridge is open, that would be strategically placed and would notify drivers or anybody that's traveling through those areas that the bridge was open or closed, whichever way you want to refer to it. But it'd be clear to a motorist that it would not be available to them. And this is a type of system that has been used on the Chelsea Street Bridge in East Boston, as well as the Fairhaven Bridge down in our southeastern region of the state. And it's a fairly, I don't want to say it's a simple system, but it uses Wi-Fi and basically from the control house, a message can be sent out, or those signs can be activated when the bridge is going to go up for a marine opening, or if there's a malfunction. So I believe in working with VHB, we've identified 7 locations where those signs would be helpful. As you might expect, they'd be on the Bridge Street side in Beverly, and over on the 114 side in Salem. So we've got a couple of different options to kind of see that through. Right now we're in the design development, but I don't expect that that's going to be a lengthy process. But part of the issue is with the Kernwood going to be replaced, ideally we would love to have the system integrated into the bridge operating controls, so it's seamless. When the operator is working the system to operate the bridge, that's built right into the logic, and those signs get activated. With the age of the Kernwood Bridge now and the fact that it's being replaced, we're looking at a workaround where we would still do the signs. It would still be operated from the bridge house, but it'd be a kind of an interim action that would not be directly controlled or coordinated with the bridge control system. But we have a couple of different options of implementing that. Estimated cost is about $200,000 based on what we've seen used down in the Fairhaven Bridge, which is a similar type of application. So we would expect that we would be able to do that through either an existing on-call, either drawbridge repair contract, which is in place, and you've seen the workers out there, or through our district-wide traffic signal betterment contract, whichever may be a better fit, right? It's related to the bridge, but it's more of a traffic management kind of application. The other option would be to roll it into the upcoming rehabilitation project that was described. I think Rob described it earlier. That's currently under design and expected to be advertised later this year. So we've got a couple options. I want to thank the councilor for continuing to engage me in the conversation about how that can be helpful for the neighborhood. And I'll leave it at that. But if others have other questions during the Q&A, happy to try and answer them.
Do we have any other elected officials who would like to speak? Representative Paracelli.
The question that I asked was, I've heard from a number of constituents about why they couldn't do some temporary repairs to the current Hall-Whitaker Bridge to get that opened while they're doing the permitting and construction of the temporary bridge. So I was just asking that question. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something we certainly looked at earlier on in our evaluation of the best way to attack this project. Unfortunately, the deterioration on the existing bridge is significant enough where a rehabilitation of the superstructure of the deck or of just the movable spans would not be feasible. Beyond that, there are other things that are ailing the bridge. The electrical and mechanical devices which operate the bridge are equally poor condition. And fortunately, we're not having to operate that bridge as often as a lot of our bridges. So it was something that was evaluated. Our state bridge engineer was involved in that evaluation as well as our state bridge preservation engineer, and the conclusion that was arrived at was that it just simply wasn't feasible to do a rehabilitation project that would be feasible to be able to construct.
Any other elected officials? Okay. I'm not sure what's going on with that mic exactly.
They are.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to ask folks to use that one.
And apologies that I snuck in late, but Hannah Bowen, also a city councilor at large, and appreciate everybody's feedback. Was hoping you could just clarify on the slide that talked about the permanent bridge timeline. The final date was obscured by that little block, so if we could get clarification on that.
Yeah, we can't seem to get rid of that.
Yeah, it's just blocked by the piece. And then if you can also give a quick recap on other mitigation strategies the state's been investing in and partnering with the city on, and any new strategies that you might be proposing during this period with the updated timelines.
Well, to start with the first question, that's 2032. I couldn't quite hear you on the, I'm so sorry. The second part of your question, could you speak into the mic?
Yes, is that better?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay, so I was asking about the mitigation strategies the state has already invested in and partnered with the city on, the traffic signals to make Route 62 flow better, other strategies you may be partnering with us on, and what additional investments are currently in the works for this timeline to help make things a little easier in the meantime.
Thank you.
So, again, I want to clarify and just restate what the mayor, I think, spoke very eloquently to, is that, the timelines that you're seeing here today are what is based on the current mandated regulatory timeframes. But make no mistake that MassDOT, along with, through the leadership of the mayor and the delegation, is looking at ways that we can pull those timelines back. So we're not just resting on, okay, we're gonna be done in 2032, or we're even gonna be advertising the temporary bridge in spring of 2025. We want to do better. We definitely want to do better. We hear you, and we share in your frustration. As far as the mitigation strategies you referred to, MassDOT has been assisting the city of Beverly with a small local bottleneck grant, which was aimed at trying to make improvements to the traffic signal systems on Route 62 essentially between Bridge Street and the center. I don't have an update on that. That's a project that the city is leading the charge on. We're providing the resources. We're also working with the city on developing repair options for a smaller bridge structure. It's called a BRI, but it's a bridge structure that carries Route 62. There's a culvert, if you will, a larger culvert, and it's right over by the Common Center. And through our small bridge program, we are providing the city with the design for a rehabilitation of that structure. So at the present time, we've engaged VHB. They're our consultant on that, and that design is being developed through MassDOT. Originally, it was going to be done by the city, but honestly, the cost of the design kind of rose, and so we had some conversation with the city, and we're able to take on that additional responsibility. And right now, we're developing. We're engaged to develop that to a 25% design level to see then where the process will go with that repair. But that our commitment is to continue with that design, past the 25% through the completion of the design. Did that answer your question? Thank you.
Next question. Someone wants to come up to the mic and ask a question? Just want to remind you to state your name and...
My name is Phil Venesia. I live at 29 Riverview Street. And I just had a couple of questions, but first a statement. I wish the residents in Rouse Side had the same consideration you give the Yacht Club and the Flounders. You've kind of done nothing for us. I understand the timelines and everything, and those mean kind of nothing till you get started, because you haven't really done anything yet. But that's neither here nor there. What can you do for the quality of life, since it's your bridge that you screwed for us all on? What are you doing to help us get through the next 15 years, other than a traffic light? Have you got any kind of plan whatsoever? Anyone? Or are we just going to oh, too bad, folks. Just live through it, drive down Elliott Street, take you 40 minutes, but it's okay, because we got a plan that in 2034, you might just have a bridge. Possibly. And what are we going to do for us? You got a wonderful plan. What are you doing for us right now, other than a traffic signal somewhere?
Well, I think for starters, we presented our plan for the temporary bridge.
Right.
So
but that's not our
the first
problem.
thing. That's not 2035. We're talking 2027 for the temporary bridge. No, 2027 is our targeted opening for the...
There you go. Not so bad, is it? Only 5 years. Only 5 more years. Don't worry about it. You get anything? I mean, all we're asking for is a little traffic relief. You can't,
So like I was...
You can't provide miracles. I understand that.
Right. So I think we heard your point clearly, and yours as well. As we said, we're working under the regulatory confines, but
I get that.
we are looking to improve upon that, because we want to come back and tell you that we can do that sooner.
I know, but we've been waiting a year, and nothing's changed. I understand all the issues. I'm an engineer myself. I understand the issues with the permitting and the, milestone chart, everything else you got going on. But in the end, a year has gone by, and we can't get around town. That's all most of us, I think, really would care about at this moment is, can you somehow make it so that it's not such a pain in the neck to go down Elliott Street?
And I think that's exactly what the small bottleneck grant award was for, was trying to make...
And what did we do with it? Do you know, by any chance?
It's as I said, that project was, the goal of that project was to upgrade the traffic signal control on those intersections on Route 62. It's as I said, the city is currently in the midst of doing that.
Ah, okay,
Yeah.
we're waiting again, yeah. All right, thank you very much for nothing.
Yep.
Hello, I'm Andrea, and I thank you guys for being here tonight. I do want to ask a question that I may have missed, but I'm hoping for some clarification in terms of the timelines and with the temporary bridge that is being proposed in alignment with the permanent bridge. I think I may have missed the discussion as to why we're not able to just go to the to the permanent bridge and cut down on the time that it's going to take. where we're building 3 bridges if we just build the 2 permanent bridges. If someone could just refresh, because I may have missed that in the discussion. Thank you.
You want me to take this one? So the design of the permanent bridges is longer than the temporary bridge. So I think it makes perfect sense, I think, to build a temporary bridge because we can get that up faster. And not only that, but it will facilitate traffic movement and a reliable way to move traffic so that once the permanent bridge designs are done, we could build both of those bridges simultaneously rather than one at a time.
Okay. And then will the temporary be in place with the permanent, or will the temporary be torn down upon completion of the permanent?
The temporary will be in use until the permanent is completed. Then the temporary bridge will be taken down.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Hi, my name is Jennifer, and I'm here on behalf of the Ryleside Plaza. One of the obvious obstacles seems to be this timeline that is limited due to these fishery regulations. So we can see like only 5 months of the year construction is even, plausible. So am I missing that prefabrication is taking place at an adjacent location? Because wouldn't that be the obvious solution? You could be still constructing nearby and getting things ready to be, because I don't want to believe that for the other months of the year that nothing's happening, that the construction is only going to happen in those 5 months, and all the other time we're just waiting and wasting all that time.
So that's a great question, and that is definitely part of our strategy. The temporary bridge is a prefabricated bridge, so that will go up quickly. But nonetheless, it does need foundations, and that work in the water will be subject to the time of year restrictions. But even within that, we will work with the regulators. We can work with them and try to get them to minimize the time of year, but also we do have construction methods that we put in place, like silk curtains, et cetera, that can facilitate construction happening even during those.
But where does that happen? Where's the prefab happening? Is it going to, we going to be able to see it happening in that area?
Oh, no, it basically like arrives on a truck, essentially. So
because there are situations where they build it right there and there's space there. Is that a possibility?
We don't even need that, to be honest with
Okay.
you. Some parts of it will be put together on site, but honestly, it's like an erector set, essentially.
Thank you.
Yep.
Your question, sir. I just wanted to again confirm that those time of year restrictions they're in place, and they restrict work activities that produce silt. So it doesn't mean that we can't conduct work outside of those timeframes. It just means that we need to be very smart, and the contractor needs to be very agile to do things such as either cofferdams or silt booms that Rob had mentioned, so that when those time of year restrictions kick in, they're able to continue the work. And that's a pretty common type of bridge construction thing in the water, where you'll have cofferdam construction that's taking place when you can produce the silt, driving the sheets for the cofferdams. And then once those cofferdams are in place, then you can be doing that subsurface work in the water, because it's technically now enclosed by the cofferdam. So I just don't want people to walk away thinking that the only time that construction activity can occur is outside of those time of year restrictions. It's just certain work activities are regulated during those times.
Hi, my name is Greg Nowak. I'm a Ryleside resident. And with the bridge being closed and the Kernwood being closed often, we're seeing a lot more traffic on 62. And I know that you mentioned some of the signal improvements, but I'm thinking about some other improvements that could be made, just more basic things like signage and existing signage that's confusing and lack of signage in other locations. I think some of this might be state if 62 is a state road. I assume that's the case. And then other intersections are definitely local. But for example, if you're heading west on 62, right after McKay Street, there's a sign that says merge left, which is crazy because there's a left turn lane right after the merge. I was driving with a friend of mine who was not familiar with the area, and he almost went into a head-on collision because it's just a very confusing signage. It seems like the sign was left over somewhere in a pile, and someone grabbed it and says, well, it's got the word merge on it, throw it up. And it's just a simple merge right instead of merge left. And it's, I don't know if I'm out of line here. I'm an engineer, but I'm by no means a transportation engineer. But there's another intersection where River Street meets Pleasant Street. And if you're coming north from the Goat Hill area, there's no sign that lets you know that the oncoming traffic doesn't stop. I've even offered to put up a sign. You can get them for like $50 online, but I think if I did, I'd get arrested. But I mean, there's some simple signage improvements that could just make moving around the city a lot easier, and it would be really cheap. And I'm wondering if we could see something like that, really low-hanging fruit.
Thanks for that input.
Just, Rob, just if I could, just to clarify, Route 62 is a state-numbered route. It's actually under the jurisdiction of the city in this particular area. So that's why I said is we're working in partnership with the mayor and his team on the small bottleneck grant. And obviously, if there's signage issues, we're able and willing and ready to help and assist the city. Or if it's on a section of state highway, we're certainly willing to review those as well. So I'd encourage you, if you have suggestions, sir, just if you want to either pursue those, and get those to either the mayor or Mike Collins or the councilor, and we can certainly work collaboratively with the city to review any of those. Mayor, I didn't know if you wanted to follow up on that.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I do want to, because it's come up a couple times, the small bottleneck grant money from the state, we've been waiting on delivery of some of the key equipment. It's a supply chain thing, and I'm going to ask Commissioner Collins just to give you a little sense of what to expect when that is done.
As the mayor pointed out, we ordered the equipment nearly a year ago, and I'm sure anyone who's in construction of any kind knows the supply chain is not even remotely fixed, especially when it comes to things that are made out of electronics. And so we've only been able to do a minimal amount of the work. We put in a camera at McPherson intersection because the detection for the oncoming traffic was broken, but the camera was put in place to take care of that, and we were able to replace the lights at the Center Drive and Elliott and Route 62. Just the lights on the string suspended above the roadway. In terms of actually labor, that was one of the bigger parts of the job that we have to do. The rest of it is mostly replacing the control cabinets with much more intelligent controls and using cameras for detection, which should improve the flow of traffic on the route. But I happened to get a phone call from the vendor this afternoon. They have all of the parts finally. It's been an unbelievably slow process and frustrating for us because we were told that we would have all the parts last fall and that we would have these things implemented last fall. But there's only so much we can do because we can't invent the parts if they don't exist. But they do have everything now, and things are being programmed, and hopefully in the next month or so, things will be installed. I didn't get a firm timeline out of them. Some of the intersections are complicated. As we know, Beckford and McPherson both have railroad involved, and that exponentially increases the difficulty of the programming and the design. But we finally have the parts, and we're looking forward to getting that stuff in. That should help smooth things out a little bit in terms of traffic flow.
Mike, in total, which intersections?
It's 4 intersections in total. It's the Beckford, McPherson, Center Drive, and McKay. So the last 4. I think if we're honest with ourselves, when we redid 1A, those intersections got a lot better. They got a lot more efficient. I personally avoided Gloucester Crossing like the plague, but now it works pretty well. You can get through there in one light cycle from almost any direction at almost any time of day. And it really shined a light on how bad Route 62's intersections operate. So we're really looking forward to trying to bring that same level of technology, even a better technology that's on 1A, some more modern technology. We're using the latest and greatest out on Route 62. So it's coming pretty soon, and it should help quite a bit.
Just, excuse me, ma'am, if you could just hold off 1 second. I just wanted to recognize that Senator Lovely has been able to join us. And Senator, I didn't know if you wanted to say anything, but I wanted to give you the opportunity. And if that microphone is not working, so I will bring you this. I'll bring you this.
That's all I was going to say, is that mic should now be operational.
Oh.
That's it.
Thank you.
Test, test, test. Yes, it's working. Thank you. Thank you to MassDOT and the team. I'm sorry that I'm late. My daughter is about to have our second grandchild, so she just left Beverly Hospital.
Congratulations.
False alarm. But we were watching the 2.5-year-old, so we're on call. So appreciate your patience. And just want to let you know that we're working really hard with the MassDOT team, actually really pushing the MassDOT team, and they're being very, very good with us as we're trying to really speed up this timeline. It just seems so extraordinary. And how can we get there faster? And we know that it's been almost a year, and it's been very difficult for the neighborhood and for you as neighbors and with traffic patterns. And I think some of the suggestions to manage traffic, the city is working so hard to be able to make that happen as well. And again, the economy and supply chain isn't cooperating with us, but we are here. We are working constantly with the mayor's office, with the ward councilor, with the team here to get this done as quickly as possible. No one's happy that we're at this point, and especially the MassDOT team, but they're working hard. So I hear from some of you. Please, continue to contact us. And we know it's the patience of Job at this point, just to try to get there. But we're here, we're working very hard. So thank you for the opportunity. I'll keep you posted on that, baby. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Chris Benjamin. I live off of East Garfield on top of a very large rock. And so a couple of questions. About 15 years ago, MassDOT did a massive project on the Bridge Street Bridge. I mean, barges, ships, the whole 9 yards. But I never heard anything else about it. I assumed that it got done. And Bass Haven was cared for because the center bridge worked. I think they worked on the center span. They had a really long thing. They took out an incredible amount of old wood and put in all new wood. It's a huge project, but it didn't take 10 years. So the second question is, there was a list of people at the very beginning. You had a list. One of them was a traffic person. Is there a report on somewhere that we can read about how traffic has been evaluated or the conclusions of that particular individual?
Hi, I'm Christine Triarchis, the traffic engineer who was noted on the first slide. So yes, we did some preliminary analysis. We were actually originally working on pre-25% for both of these bridges prior to the Hall-Whitaker having to come offline last year. So we had done some very preliminary alternatives analysis where we looked at some volumes that were collected. Unfortunately, timing-wise, they were collected in 2020. So obviously during COVID conditions, but we did have some volumes prior to that actually on Bridge Street and on Kernwood from even prior to that we could use to adjust those volumes. So we had some very, very preliminary alternatives. What we are doing right now is I think it was noted, we just collected all new traffic data throughout the entire study area to kick off the design for the permanent bridges. So what that means is we collected data at 24 intersections, as well as along the Kernwood Avenue Bridge and a number of other like 7-day ATRs on 1A and 114 and Route 62. And we just got that data back last week, so we are just kicking off the analysis where we will be doing an analysis of detour and diversion plans for both of the permanent replacements for both Bridge Street and Kernwood. So we will be looking at that, especially for when the Kernwood comes offline, when that bridge is constructed for the permanent as well.
Does MassDOT have a Bridge Street project? Not the Bridge Street Bridge, but the Bridge Street itself?
Yes. There is a
Yeah, go ahead.
reconstruction of Bridge Street.
So what's going on?
So that's a project that, again, the city is our partner in that. They're the proponent of it. They're funding the design of and the right-of-way acquisition for that. MassDOT will be funding the construction and administering the construction contract. I believe Frank Szynski, my deputy highway director, that is on the tip for this year. So that will be scheduled this federal fiscal year, which ends. Federal fiscal year for advertising purposes ends September 30th. So that project will be advertised in the next few months. And Mayor, I don't know if you want to speak to any more on that?
Yes, thanks, Paul, and thanks, Chris. I can speak to that more from layperson's language. So the project has been underway, the planning for and working through the state's TIP process. It's the Transportation Improvement Plan. It's really the only way cities and towns get bigger, more expensive projects done. It's like a $14 million-ish project. So when Paul said it'll be advertised in August, September. It's got to beat the end of the federal fiscal year, which means that the construction on it should begin in the spring of next year. Commissioner Collins and our own water department has been out there a lot of days this year already doing water work on Bridge Street, replacing part of the water main, connecting anew to addresses on either side of Bridge Street. So you see some days that work going on, and that'll continue through the course of this year. As I said, the TIP project, which will be the whole reconstruction, it's really a rebuild. It's new drainage, it's sidewalks, it's pavement, it's all of that. It's bike lanes. That's been something that's been under design for several years. Residents of Bridge Street know a lot about it because there have been meetings along the way, and you've talked with the traffic engineers who designed it. You've talked with our own engineering department around all the right-of-way work along the way. But it should be constructed starting next spring. And as I said, you're seeing work out there from our own folks this year. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks. Sure. Is the traffic report available online? Can we see it?
Are you talking about for the temporary bridge project, a permanent bridge project, or the Bridge Street project we just talked about?
All of the above.
I don't know for sure if they're readily available online or if the city's posted it. There was what's called a functional design report done for the Bridge Street corridor project back a number of years ago when they were at 25% design. That is the level of report that we are kicking off right now for the Bridge Street and Kernwood permanent designs as well. We have some very preliminary analysis that was done, I believe, last summer that I'm sure we can make readily available if that's okay with MassDOT. I believe it was sent to the city, and if not, I'm sure we could get it in their hands to post. And similar with the new data as well as once it's summarized and in a report format.
Thank you.
Hello again. Forgive me if I'm getting ahead of the discussion, but as far as the Kernwood replacement goes, has there been any consideration to raising its height so maybe it doesn't have to open as often? I know the approach seems favorable on the Salem side. I don't know if it's as favorable on the Beverly side.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, and Rob, you can jump. It's good. So it's under consideration is to try and maximize the opening that we possibly can to reduce the number of openings. As you said, the clearances we'd like to maximize, but what ends up happening is we are constrained by the approaches on either side and whether or not we can actually bring the touchdown points back in within the maximum grades that are allowed to allow for ADA and AAB compliance for pedestrian moves, as well as avoiding any unnecessary impacts to right-of-way as well. If we start raising it, then we got to start dragging out the project limits and the extent of the project limits, and oftentimes that has a negative effect on the abutting properties adjacent to it. So we're still going through the various alternatives that are under investigation right now for the Kernwood full replacement, but it is one of the things that we always strive to do with the movables, is to maximize the clearance so that we can get as much movement under it without any of the openings required.
I'm going to try this one out. George Gomes, 63 Bridge Street, apartment 2. I had a question about traffic counts, specifically whether you guys take traffic counts of non-motor vehicles, aka pedestrian cyclists.
Yes, we do.
Have those been taken across the bridge that is across Hall-Whitaker after the closure? That part of that
We
program?
have not done them after the closure, no, on the Hall-Whitaker. We did have some both pedestrian and bicycle counts in addition to vehicular from pre-closure, both in 2015, 2020, and 2021 from various count points. And then we did, when we collected new data just now, we did a number of intersections, including Bridge at River and Bridge at Kernwood, and those were, I believe, both all-day counts, and we have pedestrians and bicycle information for those as well.
Okay, great. I guess going along with that, my understanding from the presentation was that pedestrian and cyclist access would be unimpeded during the entirety of construction of the temporary bridge, then of course accommodated by the temporary bridge and the, okay, I see nods for the record. I just want to make sure that that was the case. And then I had one more question, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of stacking them. The question about the tip kind of got me thinking about budget. Is this budgeted? What is what do you guys have to do to make sure that there's money for this that's going to be there on the timeline that you guys are talking about? And thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. For the temporary bridge, we are funded to move forward. This is of critical importance, not only for the community, but it is also for all of the elected delegation that represent you, as well as that is for MassDOT. So we are funded to move forward with the temporary bridge as quickly as we can develop the design and get through the permitting process and the right-of-way process.
Go ahead.
Thanks again, gentlemen, for coming out, and madam, for coming out today. You are operating under, of course, severe constraints, and we hope that those timelines can be compressed. Thank you, Mayor. We've had a little bit of mission creep here, and some things floated across that I didn't quite catch. Something about a culvert under 62 and a culvert work that was needed. I'm assuming that's in front of the Cummings Center because that's where the water is. Is this yet another thing that's coming up? What did I hear? Or did I not hear anything?
No, you're absolutely right. And that's the culvert that we're talking about, and that it's not related to this project.
I know it's not.
But it is the question that was raised was steps that MassDOT has been taking to assist the city with some of the challenges that have been brought on by the bridge closure.
Okay.
And that Route 62 being the primary detour route for the Bridge Street closure, that's where the concept of the small bottleneck grant program, which MassDOT has, so we made funds available to the city to be able to allow them to make improvements to do just what Commissioner Collins and the mayor had alluded to ultimately improve traffic flow and safety along the corridor. The culvert is it's a BRI, right? There's culverts, there's BRIs, and there's bridges.
Jargon,
and
jargon.
I'm going to bore you on
what's
that.
BRI? What's BRI?
What's that?
What is BRI?
BRI. It's just that's John. Do you want to? Yeah, so it's a bridge. It's a structure that is greater than 10 feet in structural length, less than 20.
Okay.
A bridge. NBIS bridge, National Bridge Inspection Standards, is a bridge that's greater than 20 feet.
Okay.
So MassDOT has a program that it's called the Small Bridge Program that we make available to cities and towns to assist them with doing repairs to rehabilitations to locally owned structures that fit within that category. The Route 62 BRI is a structure that has some issues that we're assisting the city in developing a design to remediate.
And that work might be slated. I mean, you're talking about work in front of the Cummings Center.
Correct.
On 62.
Correct.
The absolute nexus of all of our traffic woes. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, and again, the timing of that has not been set when that work's going to be doing. It's the intent is to develop a design to determine what's needed, and then develop, with that, be able to develop an implementation strategy of how it could be managed.
So we have yet more to look forward to with this. I'm not being facetious here. You know, there's been a lot of frustration expressed in this room, and now you're talking about you know, undoubtedly necessary work. I'm sure it's necessary, and of course we've got to remember about Schubert. I mean, how's Schubert going to get to and fro?
So I can try to help on that one. So
Please.
Because it is a culvert, it's a long culvert. It does extend under the road and extends into that development there, apartment complex. It's being MassDOT has assigned this contract to VHB as part of our master services agreement. The person who's leading the charge for VHB is 2 doors down from me, and we're having regular conversations. At this time, the discussion is a repair from the underside that would not affect the top side.
So no
maintain
surface
traffic.
disruption, something that you can approach from the sides or underneath. And it would
From
not
underneath
be,
because of the structure type.
that would be nice.
And that's what we're working with the district bridge engineer on.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Hi there. My name's Alex Brintakis. I live downtown. I have a couple of concerns with the proposed alignment of the temporary bridge. The fact that it is on the seaward side, you know, closer to the ocean, and also it seems, you know, based on at least what you showed, it seems to be very, very close to the span of the ultimate permanent bridge. Is that going to affect, you know, the ability of that temporary bridge to remain open throughout the construction process?
Where the layout is intentional with the permanent bridge in mind, and because we're developing both simultaneously, we are looking at things just like that to make sure that we can maintain and will maintain the temporary bridge open during construction of the permanent bridge.
Right. One other kind of related question. At the November meeting, there was some discussion of the permanent bridge ultimately changing alignments completely and coming in, basically, you know, keep going straight down Federal Street and then merging with, you know, close to where, you know, it comes out on the other side now. Has there been any further discussion on that?
Picture the slide that was up there at that meeting. And the idea was, if the temporary bridge goes back on alignment, what are things that we can do? And the discussion at the time was, what would a permanent bridge off alignment mean for us? Environmentally, there's salt marsh, and there is parkland that we would be hitting, even more hurdles than we're trying to deal with right now on the temporary and or the permanent bridges. That idea became temp bridge off alignment, permanent bridge on existing alignment. So that is not a preferred approach at this time by our team.
Thank you.
I will try to stop saying at this time.
Go ahead.
Leslie Byrne, Doloff Avenue. My question is I've got a few questions actually. How often are the bridges inspected? Every 2 years? And where do those inspection results go? Does the city get a copy of those inspections?
I was just going to say and I'll let Mike follow up, and I may ask John Lee, our bridge engineer, to come up and just offer a few words. But, you know, what Mike alluded to is every bridge in Massachusetts, and again, we're talking about the bridges, the ones that are 20 feet longer, are inspected at a minimum of every 2 years. There are elements of both the Kernwood and the Hall-Whitaker Bridge Street, because it's still in operation for marine traffic and it's still open for pedestrian and bikes, that are inspected on a more frequent basis. They're called special member inspections. As far as the results of the inspections, as a DOT bridge, I don't think they're routinely sent to the community, but we're certainly able to share them with the community if there's a desire.
My other question is, the Hall-Whitaker Bridge has been deteriorating for decades. Why was it suddenly closed when its deterioration was known for decades, when a temporary bridge could have very easily been built alongside of that with keeping the Hall-Whitaker Bridge still in operation? Thank you.
So it's not a response you're going to like to hear. We have been monitoring on a regular basis, but it's funding constraints. And if it weren't for the fact that the Biden infrastructure law, or the bipartisan infrastructure law that was actually went into effect and made available funding for bridges, specifically like this, in the permanent Kernwood and in the permanent Hall-Whitaker, that was really the driver. It's just the ability for us to be able to fund it within the bridge program that we currently had.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jen Wallace, also a Ryle Side resident. Could you bring up the slide that showed the permanent bridge timeline? I just wanted to clarify, maybe I'm not getting the project right, but are you saying that both the Kernwood and the Hall-Whitaker permanent bridges are going to be constructed at the same time?
That's correct. Yes, that's the plan. Because we'll be able to maintain in service during all phases of construction of those permanent bridges, the temporary bridge will remain operational.
So how am I going to get to Salem?
It goes to the fact that this is why Christine is doing the traffic studies right now to determine what is the best way to mitigate what the demands of the destinations are for many of the people that are currently using Kernwood, and whether or not Bridge Street, or are there some other viable means to be able to divert folks to what their destination may be or their origin may be. This is something that we face on a regular basis in every community throughout the state, to try and identify where the majority of folks are starting their trips and ending their trips, and knowing full well that there's going to be inconveniences and diversions and detours for the construction of the new bridges. We strive to identify what is the best means to move folks around during that inconvenience in that period. And then we bring it back to the public, and we will walk you through it and talk to you. And if there are things that don't work or are inconvenient, it just doesn't make sense, then of course we're going to be open to other ideas. And this is why we're working so closely right now with the mayor's team. Identify how best to be able to construct these permanent bridges and maintain traffic flow so that we're not inconveniencing the public any more than just the construction itself.
So I would suggest, and maybe it's too early for this, but I would suggest that you enlarge your traffic study patterns to include us getting to the Beverly-Salem Bridge from Ryle Side, because that intersection around the Anchor, and I mean, that's a nightmare now. But you mentioned that you're going to bring these ideas back to the public, and I would like to make a request. I appreciate how complex this project is. I actually went and had a very fruitful conversation with the mayor a couple of weeks ago, because you guys have been working your butts off, and we appreciate that you're coordinating with the city. None of us knew any of that. We haven't heard from you in 8 months, coming on 9 months. And I would like to request that we get a quarterly update between now and the end of these projects, because keeping us in the dark isn't helping you guys at all. And the more we know, especially since you've got critical deadlines up there, let us know as each one of those deadlines come. Did we make it? Did we not make it? Are we on schedule? Are we not on schedule? So I would like to make that request of you guys, and hopefully you'll be able to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, just to quickly touch upon your suggestion about the Beverly-Salem Bridge, yes, a lot of intersections along that path that would take you along 114 and up 1A into Beverly were included within our traffic data collection.
Hi, Julie Murray, Winthrop Ave. I'm affected by the Kernwood Bridge and the Hall-Whitaker. I go over the Kernwood Bridge every day to go to work in Peabody. What's frustrating is when the bridge is closed. The signage is horrendous. I'm already at the bridge. One day I was on the bridge. We thought it was just waiting to reopen. Nobody posted a sign. I was on the Salem side. Nobody did anything. We're all trying to turn around on the bridge. We have robocalls. I'm asking the mayor to use the robocall when the bridge is stuck and closed. Send out a robocall. That would be a great way for people not to have to turn around on Upland or other streets. My other thing is, 4 more years, it's been a year. Open one day, close the next day. Budget constraints is not acceptable. To hear that you knew maybe decades ago this was going to be a problem. I want to know from the city how response times from emergency vehicles, fire, police, ambulance, EMTs, how have they been affected for the members of Ryle Side with medical issues or fires? How is that being affected in the response times? I live here, my mother lives in Ryle Side. How are we being affected as citizens who pay our taxes?
So couple things. One, we have prepared some, and we'll try to put them out, again, some answers to frequently asked questions. At a meeting last summer, last fall, Fire Chief O'Connor came and talked through some of the response time questions, and we'll put that back out there. Sometimes, depending where you are in Ryle Side, right, sometimes the engine that'll get there quickest is coming from North Beverly, sometimes from Central and downtown. So for some parts of Ryle Side, the response times haven't really changed. I think we know that if you're down in Lower Bridge in those neighborhoods like Winthrop, they have changed. Chief O'Connor can talk about the federal standards for response times and how we're still within all of them, but that doesn't change that they're longer than they were. We get that. So we'll get that data back out there. The other thing, and Jen said it, I don't know how frequently we can or should have MassDOT back in, but we, your local elected officials, we can get together more frequently with you and share updates and then bring these folks in when it makes sense. So I think that makes total sense. You and I talked about it before, and we should plan to do that. Probably the next time should probably be September, if that makes sense to you folks. And so we'll do that, and maybe you folks will be part of that because it'll make sense to it as well. Anyway, does that answer some of the?
It does some, but it's frustrating that minutes could save a life. My other thing is the robocall was requested in November for these meetings, and we did not get one. If I wasn't online looking at the trash calendar, I wouldn't have seen the update. So again, we have the system to send out the robocalls for these meetings so we could have even more citizens be aware of it. We get them for trash collection, we get them for snow days, we get them for different things. It could be sent out within 5 minutes for that.
No, you're absolutely right. I heard it, I don't know who said it, on Kernwood Bridge closures, because the last several times they've happened, right, it's always at a bad time. We can do that for that purpose. We can do that for these upcoming meetings. It's easy enough on the program to just draw a map around the neighborhoods, so Ryle Side, Shingleville, downtown. We can easily do that for the upcoming meetings.
Okay, and I want to just, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So I will be going the other way on 62 towards Danvers to cut over to Peabody. So you have to, when you do your study when Kernwood closes, how is it going to affect that traffic also? This gentleman spoke about the intersection just past McKay. The left lane ends, merge left. It is horrendous. People are awful, cutting each other off. I'm surprised there haven't been more accidents. It's very frustrating. I try not to go between 3:30 and 7:30 in that area. It can be difficult. So I agree with that. It's just frustrating because I'm affected by both bridges at this point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello again. On the heels of her comments about we all pay our taxes and your response about funding, you're funded by primarily the state, correct? And the federal. And I'm grateful for the infrastructure bill to help fund this. But if that weren't available, it sounds like we'd be in even worse shape than we're in right now. So I guess my question is more for our state legislators. We do pay a lot in taxes here in Massachusetts, so where's all the money going?
Well, I won't answer on behalf of the senator, but what I can say is with regards to MassDOT and how we utilize the funds, we have over 5,000 bridges throughout the state, and we prioritize and rank each of those, and we work within the budgets that we have allocated, provided to us, both by the state legislature and by the federal government. So I recognize, the delay in associated getting to a point where we're able to now fund both the replacement of Kernwood and Hall-Whitaker. But fortunately, we are in a position now moving forward, and what we are here to do is to try and find ways to accelerate that, utilize the funds that have been made available to us at this juncture, and don't lose them, because oftentimes the longer you wait, the longer you delay, you may be in a position where you lose that funding. We don't want that. So we're here to tell you we're striving to find any means necessary to not only accelerate the temporary bridge, but also accelerate the permanent bridge replacements as well, within the funding mechanisms and timeframes that we have available to us.
If I could add to that, so the things that we've been learning along the way, right? The bipartisan infrastructure law, it brought a lot of new resources to states. It also, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, it also included an overdue reauthorization of the ICE-T program, which is in every 5 years, I think, every 5 years, reauthorization at the federal level for money for highways and other roads. So there's a lot there. The 5-year allotment to Massachusetts for bridges, and guys, again, tell me if I'm wrong, the 5-year allotment to Massachusetts for bridges is $1.2 billion, roughly. And so just to give a sense of that, former Governor Baker did a press conference right after the law was announced, and he said that there were 63 bridges that were the top priority bridges in the state, 2 of them being Kernwood and Hall-Whitaker, right? It's been quoted to me during this process that the price tag all in, when it's all said and done for these 3 bridges, the temp and the 2 permanent replacements, could approach $200 million. Now that's about a sixth of the $1.2 billion that's supposed to replace 63 bridges. Point being, it isn't all going to happen within 5 years, and this is going to also rely on future authorizations and appropriations of additional federal money, right? Because it all isn't happening within 5 years of last fall. So it's a process. It's ongoing federal investments. I think we all probably have the same sense that as a country, our infrastructure needs more investment than has been coming its way. But what we know, and you heard Mike say it, the temporary bridge is all in on getting that thing permitted and built, and the funding for the permanent bridges is going to be ours collectively to make sure it stays on track and stays a high priority. I think the fact that they're both drawbridges, the fact that the Kernwood opens over 3,000 times a year to boat traffic, and I heard the complaint earlier, I share it. I've understood for some time that the navigable waterways, boat traffic has a priority at the federal level. It can be frustrating when you spend most or all of your time in cars. I know some of us are, some people have boats and cars in the room, but that's been a challenge for a long time with our roadways and our waterways. But the fact that these bridges are swing spans and the permanents will be swing spans because the waterways will going to continue to need to accommodate boats should hopefully help us not have them put off track as we go through all of this. Yeah.
Hi, Deb Devsky from Rowell Ave in Ryleside. A couple of things I want to mention to the traffic director person. I hope you've taken into consideration the residents on North Street and that area of Peabody, that often those folks would come over the Kernwood Bridge and the Hall-Whitaker Bridge to take the train into Boston. That is a significant amount of traffic. Now those folks go to Salem because there's no easy way to use the Beverly train station. So I hope you consider that.
Yes, we did. In our very preliminary traffic analysis, when we first started this process, we did pull some origin destination information. And to your point, the main, I'll say, path through this area that we saw was in the morning headed northbound on Kernwood, taking a right, headed over Bridge, and then headed into downtown Beverly. And in the evening, it's the reverse traffic as well. So to your point, that is something that we noted in our very preliminary analysis, and all of that will be updated as part of the updated studies for the permanent bridge designs as well, because at this point, that was a couple of years ago.
Great, glad to hear that. Second, the Bridge Street project. I sure hope that those silly bump outs are not going to be put all along Route 62, like North Street with their crazy parking on one side and all that. That's just a comment. I don't expect any response for that, but that's my opinion on that. The third point I want to make is my husband and I each had a hospital visit to Beverly Hospital within 2 weeks apart. My husband, I called an ambulance for him, and I could have driven him more quickly to the hospital because the second time around, I was not in an emergency situation, and he drove me to the hospital. His visit was around 12:30 in the morning when traffic was extremely light. Mine was at 7:30 at night when traffic is a little bit busier. So I do kind of dispute what you say, Mayor Cahill. I'm sure they fall within the boundaries of the appropriate timeline given. But when you're watching your loved one having a hard time breathing, you're kind of waiting for that ambulance to pull up. And it took a little bit too long for my liking.
My name's April Richard. I'm over in Ryleside. I just have a question about the new bridges. What is the lifespan of those bridges that are going to be built, the permanent bridges?
75-year lifespan. That's what we designed to.
I'm Ron Gennard, live in Melvin Avenue in Beverly and Ryleside.
Closer to the mic.
If we're planning on closing, having a temporary bridge, if you're going to build a temporary bridge and close Kernwood, okay, while the bridge, we're all going to use a temporary bridge on Bridge Street with Kernwood Bridge closed. Why don't you build a temporary bridge now alongside of Kernwood? So then you don't have any problems. You know what? You have no idea what it's like to live in Ryleside. I don't even go downtown anymore. It isn't worth it, okay? When I leave my house in the morning to where I'm going to go to Sawyer Road. If I go down Elliott Street, forget it. So I go up Elliott Street towards 128. It's a deadlock both ways. I'm telling you, a temporary bridge just for Bridge Street, and you're going to close Kernwood, never happen. You got to build another temporary bridge alongside that, and if you start doing it now, it might work.
I have one last question. This has got me thinking about the future. And similar, if we have all of the traffic that was potentially going down Kernwood, diverting to Bridge Street in Beverly, going over the Hall-Whitaker temporary, are we and I don't know whose jurisdiction this is, but are we thinking ahead in terms of that traffic, right? Of traffic lights and people trying to get out of all the side streets. Right now we have one stoplight coming from the Kernwood Bridge, but to get out from some of the side streets from both sides is going to be really close to impossible if there is no pausing of traffic or monitoring of that.
Yes, so the, what's called the functional design report that we are just kicking off right now, that traffic analysis, it is a traffic and safety analysis primarily of the detour and diversion for any potential closures that go alongside with the construction.
Okay, and will we be informed of what that will potentially look like to help with feedback too?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, we want to thank everyone for coming out. We hear your concerns, appreciate the feedback. We take it all into consideration. And most likely we'll be back in the late fall from what you saw on our schedule. Thank you very much.